For the Power BI tip today, we're going to talk about naming visuals, naming reports, and naming tabs. This is a great example of a Power BI report that has great names on the visuals. Look at proposed undeveloped lots, developed lots, proposed undeveloped lots by precinct, new families moving into the Shire. These are all excellent names, and what they do is they allow the user to look at the report and learn how to use it without having to be trained on it or read any documentation, because the names are so clear, and that is excellent. By default, Power BI uses terrible names for its visuals and for its tabs and for its reports. So look at this visual. This sum of quantity by a salesperson, that's the default name for that visual. This sales by month is what I named it. Total sales by customer is what I named it. But this sum of quantity, like if we just create a visual here real quick, right? So if I just recreate this, I do this, and then I add like customer name. So the default is sum of quantity by customer name. Really, really bad, right? So how do we go from this terrible name and customer name and sum of quantity to something like this that I already kind of curated and cleaned up a little bit? Okay, here's how you do it. So first you select the visual, make sure the visual is selected. Then go to the format, go to the general tab, go to the title, and this is where you rename it. So here we can just say total sales by customer. Done. Okay. Now we can rename the axes. So the customer name axes, if we go back to the visual, actually let's go back to the data fields, and right here under the y-axis, we'll just rename the visual customer space name. That's a little bit better. And then down here where it says sum of quantity, we'll rename this and we'll say, total sales. There, total sales. Now, I don't really like that it's like 0 to 1K here. I'm not sure why it's like that. That's not the greatest. So what we can do is just add data labels is probably a good idea here. So we just go back to the format your visual. We go to data labels, we click on, and now we can see the actual amounts there. And now we have a properly named visual, way better than the default. So if we look at the sum of quantity by a salesperson, which is very similar, let's do it one more time. We'll clean this one up too so you get it again. So we click on general, click on title, we go over here and we'll just say total units sold, oh, a little typo there, hang on, sold by salesperson. Okay, that's a good title. And then we get the salespeople. Salesperson's okay. Sum of quantity is bad though, right? So we go back to the data fields, right? We go get sum of quantity, we rename for this visual, and we just say quantity of units sold. There, we cleaned that up. Okay, so we've cleaned up the visual. We've cleaned up the titles and the axes. The other thing to remember is to clean up the tab name. So I've called this one Sales Analysis and Aggregate. The default name was like page 1. That's a terrible name. Never keep it on the default. Other terrible names are like Main Grid, Overview, Dashboard. Like those are all really bad names. They don't teach the user anything. So remember to have a good name for the report that you're building. If you can't figure out a good name, that might be an indicator that your report is too complicated, and you should simplify it so that the name kind of comes to you easily, right? If you do that, it will also teach the user easily, which would be a very good thing. The last thing is to name the Power BI, the PBIX file, something, because that name appears in the Power BI service when we publish it. So that happens when you just save it, and make sure that you use a really good name that is unique so that when people search for it, they can find it and they know what they're looking for. And that's it. Remember, naming is important. Don't go off the default name, and try to teach the user everything they need to know to use a report just by looking at the report. And if you do that, you'll be well on your way to creating great Power BI reports that are informative and very useful to the people that have requested them. Thanks so much.